the pop culture field manual.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Pop Culture Field Manual podcast. We are sitting right at that intersection of weapons, action, the military, and today, leadership is the name of the game. Leadership, it's a no-brainer that great leadership is essential in the military, but good leadership is important in all walks of life. But what makes a good leader? Is it just good looks and charisma, as Izzy seems to believe? Or is it strategic mind? Is it empathy? Is it all of these things roll into one form, to form some amorphous mass of leadership ability unseen since the times of the great Pharaoh Leaderukut? Chris, what are you doing? He's putting a bunch of words I can't read here.
Pharaoh Leaderukut.
Yeah, the great Pharaoh Leaderukut.
I don't Google check that.
Oh,
It's
that
probably
just
not
makes
gonna be
sense. I
real.
probably should have. Yeah, the great Leaderukut, a person who I just made up for a joke. Nice, Chris. I should have ended that. That's exactly what we're here to discuss today. What makes a good leader, and who are the best leaders in pop culture? So without further ado, let's start with that first question. So what makes a good leader, Izzy?
I think
what
somebody
do you
who
think
can
makes a good
I
leader?
think somebody who can properly pronounce the word amorphous.
Oh, okay. So I'm out of the running then, huh?
No,
Amorphous.
man, great leadership is well, the Army has a definition for leadership because the Army has a definition for everything.
Absolutely.
The Army's definition
It
of
is
leadership.
all-knowing.
Yeah, they got to codify and write down and streamline everything for the lowest common denominator. The Army's definition of leadership is the process of influencing people by providing purpose, direction, and motivation to accomplish the mission and improve the organization. Toxic leadership can also be seen as those who put their own needs or image above their subordinates, who micromanage their subordinates, and who are insecure in their own positions. I think a lot of us aspire to know people who are good leaders, and I think a lot of us can relate to that second toxic definition of leadership. Karen.
Absolutely. No, I figured it was more than appropriate because if we're talking about leadership, we're talking about all the good things, like what makes a leader. I think we definitely need to identify the bad as well that goes into leader, because some people see the word leader. Some people see it as a position, and other people see it as an identity. So typically, we want those people who see it as an identity to be the leaders that we follow and that influence us to accomplish the mission or improve the organization. But oftentimes, those who see leadership as just an occupation or a role don't fit the script and often become toxic leaders. So I think that's very important to kind of differentiate those two, or at least talk about them, because there is good, but there is bad as well, as, not just dudes in the military who've had bad leaders, but, the average person, especially if you are in the workforce, you have bosses, you have managers, you have people that are in charge of you. And oftentimes, you've experienced one that is not so great and makes the job way more difficult than it needs to be. That army definition of leadership was actually one of my board questions when I was at my sergeant's board. So I had to memorize it, and it was actually something that stuck with me because we as leaders, our main responsibility is to influence the people underneath us. And thinking about things I've done in the military, like attending Ranger School, like people that don't know the difference just think it's a challenging school. But it's in actuality, they call it and label it a leadership development course, because the reason they want all these officers and the reason they want NCOs and leaders within the military to be Ranger qualified, because the main thing you learn in Ranger School, it's not necessarily the tactics, because those people forget it right when they leave because you forget everything. But the one thing that sticks with you is the skill that is manipulation. So you learn in Ranger School, you become a master of manipulation. And I say it's manipulation, but if you can get a person to accomplish a task you are giving them when they are tired, cold, wet, and hungry, oftentimes all those put together in one, you can make anything happen. So it's really learning how to, it's not necessarily learning how to be a ranger, but it's learning how to get people to do what they want when they don't want to do it. You know, by providing purpose, direction, motivation, you can oftentimes accomplish that goal. It's just you need to be that example, because otherwise, if you're just making people do things just because you want them to do, that's manipulation. But making people do things that you are doing actively and leading from the front, then that's that's influencing.
Right.
But what do you think,
Inspiring
man?
them if you can. Well, I was thinking of the qualities and characteristics of good leadership. You and I both have a couple of different notes down here. To lead, it's like you say, we like people who in culture or in history embody these qualities as a part of who they are, rather than just occupying the position. Like we know band of brothers like Captain Sobel, what David Schwimmer's character in the beginning, he's the horrible leader. And he
is the definition of toxic leader.
Yeah. And he was a real person too, lest we forget. But, always putting himself before the men, very insecure, like you say, insecure in the position, insecure within himself. And so became offended easily, didn't take direction well, wasn't good at recognizing his own faults, and then using the men around him who had the competencies that he needed, regardless of whether or not he got the glory or the credit. Like, no, he was all about himself. So there's like a selfless aspect to being a leader. And then there's a selfish aspect to being a toxic leader. So I love what you have here. These are a lot of like embodying kind of things that everybody should probably strive for, but they're especially beneficial if you're a leader or in a leadership position: integrity, drive, empathy, resilience, patience, and communication. And then I had some other ones. By the way, I didn't put what you put because I feel like you covered it pretty well. So I tried to put other aspects in addition to.
No, of course.
Because I think empathy is like a really important one. Competency, maturity, selfless service, and then courage are some of the ones that I put there. Leaders, I think the best leaders out there, to kind of encapsulate it, are people that you want to follow. Like they inspire you either to follow them and do what they want, or to do what they've commanded, to do what you want, like to do what your job is. Like you want to do things more if you have a good leader.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Excuse me, choked up my own spit. But I get choked up talking about leadership.
Great.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think there's some core attributes that every leader should have. And from what I've seen the good and the bad, and I'm sure you have seen the good and the bad in the military side of leadership. And for me, some of the biggest ones out of those core attributes is empathy. So being able to kind of shed that armor that you think you have because you're a leader, and being able to connect with the person you're trying to lead on an individual level. So to me, whenever I was in charge of people, they weren't necessarily just subordinates to me. It's like you have to connect with them on an individual level, on an emotional plane, because at the end of the day, like I don't want these guys to think I'm their boss. I want them to think they are the reason I'm doing what I'm doing. So to be able to empathize with people's situation, and I think that takes oftentimes a lot of maturity. Just like you put in yours, you put competency, maturity, selfless service, courage, etc., because there are so many attributes for a good leader.
Right.
But I think empathy is one. Communication, like that's more of a skill than an attribute. But being able to effectively communicate and communicate in a positive way, not in a negative way. if you can combine empathy with communication and then and drive too. I mean, if you combine all these, you have an amazing person.
Yeah,
But
yeah, right.
yeah, yeah, I mean, there are so many aspects of what a good leader are, and if you have a few of these attributes, that's a great start, because we can always, just because you don't have these doesn't mean you can't work on them or work towards
Mhm.
obtaining them.
Yep.
You know, that's you can, good leaders are created. They're not, you've all heard of natural born leadership. So like someone that's born as a natural leader, like that's great. But oftentimes, like just because you don't think you have those attributes to begin with, that doesn't mean you can't mold yourself into those and incorporate it and, turn yourself into a better version of yourself.
What do you think
So
when it's people talk about natural leadership? What do you think they're talking about? What do you think that is? Like, because like you say, I think you definitely can develop yourself and stuff like. But somebody who's a natural born leader, what do you think that? What do you think that is?
Well, I mean, you have I think like natural born leadership is something like some people just have it, and there's like we've all heard about that it factor. And it's like you have, and I think it can be applied to even more things than just blanketing leadership, because you look at athletes and you have like natural athletes that are just have that it factor.
Hmm.
But then you have people that are new to the sport or new to an activity, and they train themselves and they get better and better with hard work and determination, and then they can get to that level. So I think if you combine natural born talent with drive, that's a recipe for success. But I don't think just because you're born with it, that's going to necessarily mean that you're going to use it and you're going to become the best version, because some people just rely on talent, but then there's other people that rely on hard work, and then you have the people that rely on talent and hard work, and those are often the best kinds of leaders you find and the best type of people in that job. But we have a list of best real life leaders here, and then also Izzy and I have both picked some personal people that we've encountered that we think embodies leadership. Really quick, mine as far as personal, I'm not going to mention his full name because he's still fighting the good fight. But my first team leader, which was at the time was Sergeant Love. He's probably a higher rank now, but he was everything that I considered the perfect ranger was. He was physically fit. He was experienced. He knew the job better than anybody. He was literally a walking Ranger School handbook. Like, the guy knew everything, but he was extremely empathetic. So he, didn't just, like other team leaders, was like that slave driver type of person. Because I mean, in Ranger Regiment, I've mentioned it before, you are creating a product, and oftentimes to create a diamond, when you have a lump of coal, you're gonna need pressure, and that pressure is in the form of stress oftentimes. But this guy, you can connect with him on an individual level. I never felt like I was talking to my boss. I felt like I was talking to like a parental figure, because I've never seen him yell. He never had to yell. And if we messed up, it was oftentimes a feeling of disappointment rather than like a feeling of fear that he's going to come back and mess me up or make me do a bunch of push-ups. It was never that. It was like we wanted to work for this guy because we respected him so much, not necessarily because of his position, just because he was assigned fire team leader. And I've seen that as well. But yeah, Sergeant Love was like one of the best leaders I've ever encountered in my not just my military time, but my time on this planet. What about you?
Yeah, man. The guy I chose is also one of my team sergeants that I was in the military with, Tom Williams. He's out now, so I could say it. Hopefully, he doesn't have social media, so you can't find it. But last I checked, he was still doing like contracting, still going around the world and gallivanting around,
doing it, gallivanting.
But he was I've said it before on Shift Fire when we were talking about inspirational figures. He's the best leader of men that I've ever had the pleasure of serving with, because some of the stuff on my list, he seemed like he either did or he seemed like he knew how to do everything. He certainly knew the military, how to get what he wanted, how to talk to people, who to talk to. He knew the politics kind of behind the decision-making process, and he played the game very well. He was calm too. He didn't seem immature or selfish or anything like that. You could tell he wanted people to succeed, and he didn't micromanage. He gave you, he said, I like to give you just enough rope to hang yourself with,
Yeah.
There was multiple times when I had to do something and I would ask him how to do. He's like, go figure it out. You'll figure it out. And he knew how to do it, but it wouldn't benefit me at all
Yeah.
if he
He just
just
gave
did
you
it
the
for
answers.
me. Yeah. And I look back on that and I really appreciate that because it gave me a chance to try, to fail, and to develop and to go out and find out how to seek out those answers on my own, which is a really valuable tool when you're in the military because sometimes you just got to figure stuff out. And
Yeah.
so I was very, very fortunate to have the pleasure of serving with him. It was a good experience in that I've known bad leaders in the military, and then I've also known good leaders. So it's the same environment, but you see how differently those two types of leadership operate. So yeah, Tom Williams gets my vote. So
Okay, nice, man. Well, as
yeah.
far as like figures, before we go into the pop culture, fictional characters, some people that are on my list, as far as I want to mention, as being a historically relevant and high praised leader. The first person that pops into my mind is Theodore Roosevelt. Good old Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah.
He's what I mentioned earlier, that leaders are made. They're not necessarily born. Teddy Roosevelt is, the greatest example of that. And he was one of the presidents that I actually pulled that quote from. And he strongly believed that, with hard work and dedication, anybody can be, you can do anything, because he was a great example. Because, Teddy Roosevelt, when we think about him, he was president very early on. He was the 26th president of our country. And, in his younger years, he had a lot of health issues. He was a scrawny kid. He had asthma. He was a very sickly child, but his father was such a positive leader and role model for him that it inspired him to like change himself. So even though he had asthma, he would like still, do sports, and he's picked up boxing, and they converted the, and he was really smart too, because he would be a bookworm and he just try to get all the knowledge. And, I did a biography on Theodore Roosevelt when I was in school, but, reading over some of the facts that I forgot is like his father, noticed that he was, training his mind so often that he's becoming very smart for his young age. But he's like, but his father told him, he's like, you've mastered the mind, but now you need to master the body, because with a strong body comes an even stronger mind. So his father, influenced him to start, working out and building himself, because he built his brain, but now he needs to build his body. So they converted the second story of his house into a gymnasium where Teddy Roosevelt would work out until he became strong. And then, he's a great example of a selfless service type character. Teddy Roosevelt has always been heavily involved in, service positions. So not only was he in the military during the Spanish-American War, where he led the Rough Riders in combat, he was also the police commissioner for New York City before he became the president. And the funny thing about Teddy is he didn't run for president. He was the VP to McKinley, and then McKinley was assassinated. So he took the presidency through an opening in the position, and since he was VP, he got the position, or I'm pretty sure he was VP. So he didn't run. He didn't, want to be the president in my mind. But that position, is obviously one of the most paramount positions in our country, is to lead the rest of the country. So he took over. He was at the time the youngest president in history, and he, through his leadership, the country, regardless of his political affiliation, because he believed in doing what was morally right rather than what was politically acceptable with his party. So he was part of the Republican Party, but some of his policies were progressive, and it pissed off some Republicans. But to him, it was more about doing what was right for the common man, as long as he respected the Constitution and the law. So he would do what was right for people within his limitations as a government official. So he never went against the Constitution. He never, went against, putting things into law that we see a lot today that, is kind of touchy on taking away any rights or freedoms that we are given in the Constitution. So for me, it is, thinking of leaders in real life that you can look up to, Teddy Roosevelt was on my list hardcore, first and foremost.
Oh, that's cool, man. I feel like George Patton is another one of those kinds of guys. It's easy to see. Well, there are good civilian leaders. There are good leaders in any section of life that you want to go into, but I think it can be most consequential to have when you examples of good and bad leadership. So George Patton, he's one of those charismatic guys, right? He had a big
Yeah.
personality and he had a big ego,
Huge
and
narcissist.
yeah. And
Yeah.
there's something to be said about figures in history who are big and loud and bombastic, but also competent, right? Because like
Yeah.
if you don't back it up in some way, you're not going to be in a leadership position for very long because you're going to be seen as a fraud. But George Patton, I feel like he sometimes leaders show up there and they are for that time. Like they are the perfect guy for that instance and that time in history. I think George Patton was one of those dudes because he motivated his men to fight. Like at the start of the Western Allied invasion of France, he was getting command of the Third Army, which conducted a highly successful rapid armored drive across France. And then he took the lead in relieving the beleaguered American troops at Bastogne during the Battle of the Bulge. And then he drove his forces deep into Nazi territory towards the end of the war. And he was he had a bunch of famous quotes too, or is quoted as saying a lot of cool things like "Do everything you ask of those you command." That's one thing about leadership is leading. You talk about leading from the front, and a leader being willing to do everything to put himself in any situation that he would ask his troops to be in as well. Because it's selfless and
that's the key.
It demands respect because, you know, we all get it when somebody is, you know, like politicians or whatever, when they talk a big game, but they would never do any of the things that they're asking normal Americans to do. And so it's the same kind of thing in war. George Patton, you know, he was willing to put himself out there, you know. He also said some things like moral courage is the most valuable and usually the most absent characteristic in men. That's a big one too, you know. A lot of times these leaders that they can become to embody certain characteristics, they can come to embody ideas, and it's why they're remembered, you know, long after they're gone, is that they come to embody certain ideals. And I think, you know, Patton, all these dudes, that's another thing about a leader, man, is we never assume that any leader is perfect. They all have their flaws. But they overcome those flaws, or they despite those flaws, they can inspire and lead. And I think Patton is like a great example of that. You know, and like I said, a man of his time. I think a lot of these guys were the right people at the right time, you know, through self-discipline, like Teddy Roosevelt, and then also because they had a certain personality and a certain time period, like Patton, like they rise to the top and they do great things. They lead men to greatness, you know.
Yeah, it definitely comes down to leadership style. And, you know, I would love to talk about this because obviously we've encountered different leaders, and you know, you could have great leaders that have different styles, and it depends on what the goal of the organization is and how best you can achieve that as a leader. So I wanted to start by talking about Platoon, not necessarily what the movie's about because we've talked about it a bunch, but in the movie specifically, you have two different leaders within the platoon. You have Sergeant Barnes, who's the hardcore charger, and then you have Sergeant Elias, who's more of the laid back, chill guy. But I think the movie does an excellent job of representing different leadership styles because, you know, you have transactional leadership and you have transformational leadership. And both of these characters pretty much embody both different styles. So I'd love to take a second to just explain the difference between the two so we can see that, like, you know, there is no right way to skin a cat, as we say in the military, but there's definitely a better way to do things. So I'm just going to go over Barnes and Elias and then talk about transactional and transformational. But Barnes, such leads, guides, and motivates their followers in the direction of established goals by clarifying role and task requirements. So that's, to me, is kind of like that, you know, task condition standard guy, very by the book.
Yeah.
So the followers of such leaders simply obey orders. Such leadership is necessary within the military since failure means the loss of lives. He goes on to note that Barnes demonstrates his leadership style the afternoon before the ambush when he gives the orders of who will go on duty that night. However, the failure of this style is shown with the death of the new recruit Gardner. Yet Barnes is able to give the orders and effectively run the platoon because of his reliance on the deterrence-based trust. Deterrence-based trust will work only to the degree that punishment is possible. The consequences are clear and the punishment is actually imposed. So that's an example of transactional leadership. So pretty much do X and you get Y. So in this case for Barnes, it was like, if you're not on security X, then we will die Y. So it's basically a transactional motivation. So the only reason I'm doing this is because there's punishment on the line. So it's a transaction I'm getting out of it. But on the other hand, the flip side with Sergeant Elias, he contrasts with a charismatic type of leadership style, which provides followers with the meaning by constructing and communicating a vision or image that articulates followers' values while allowing them to express their identity through a shared collective vision. Elias displays two key attributes of charismatic leader: extraordinary behavior and acting as an agent of change. As that change agent, it is Sergeant Elias's challenge to Sergeant Barnes in the village scene with the little girl and reporting it to the captain. His extraordinary behavior is shown in his what is that freaking word? Prescience. In his prescience of knowing where the enemy will come from, how to outflank them, and his superhuman effort to take on a seemingly entire Viet Cong arms by himself. So this is more of that transformational leadership that, this is what I think a true leader is going to be. That's the one that inspires you. That's the one that influences you. That's the one that you would want to trade positions with if you had the opportunity to do so. I think for me, one of the best signs of a good leader is somebody that I would want to trade lives with. So, if I see
like in terms of how they conduct themselves or the things that they've done.
Exactly, just how they conduct themselves as a leader, how many people respect them, how many people believe in them. So as a leader, when I'm seeing people in leadership positions, I gauge how good of a leader they are based on my reality. Is if I had to be that person, would I want to trade places with that individual? And if the answer is no, then I don't think they're the best of leaders. But I would love to trade lives with Sergeant Love, because he's so respected and he's so knowledgeable and he's great at the job and he's physically fit, and that's a guy that I want to be like when I'm in his shoes. But if I had Sergeant Barnes, who I'm just afraid of, but I don't respect on a level, I don't respect on a level of man to man, I wouldn't want to trade lives with him, because I get no fulfillment out of that. I don't have respect for that. But it's two different leadership styles. In the military, transactional is often seen because, you have to listen to the rank above you. That's the way it is, because if you don't, people will die. So it's not like a regular job where transactional is like, I'm not getting the best result, because if you want to work hard, it's because you make a lot of money. But at the end of the day, are those employees happy?
Where did you get this idea, transactional versus transformational leadership, from? Because I don't think I've ever heard those two terms before in leadership. No, yeah. Is that a military doctrine thing?
No, so this is actually this isn't the first time I've heard this. I'm glad I came across it, just because I think it does a really good job of putting a face to a specific style. So I went to school for business management, and this was one of the topics covered as far as leadership styles. And if you can quantify something, it makes it a little easier to understand. Like if you can paint a picture about what something specifically is, it's easy to identify it, and then ultimately it's easy to avoid it. And it's on the other side, it's easy to become that, because you can put a face to it. So transactional and transformational are just two different leadership styles. It's oftentimes comes down to the organization and what would best, work with that. In the military, transactional, you see it a lot. But in the workplace, transformational is what I would recommend more, just because you become that ideal leader that we've been talking about, somebody that's able to get on an emotional connection with their subordinates to where they look up to you, they respect you, you provide a vision, a goal, and you want people to be a part of that vision, and you want people to have the same vision as you do. Let's talk about some, or at least two dudes here that are iconic leaders within movies and within comic books. So I think we need to take some time to talk about Iron Man and Captain America, because these are two very different leaders, but they are both very effective leaders and have led with honor. So with Iron Man, it's very interesting because he's more of the narcissistic leader that you tend to see, because Tony Stark thinks he's the shit, man, and he is, and he knows it. When he's a genius, he's super wealthy, he has access to everything, he knows he's the shit, and he's 100% a narcissist. But like you were saying earlier in the episode, like there's a fine line. Like General Patton, he was a narcissist,
right?
And you often see a lot of these attributes, and I feel like it's similar to like DNA. Like if you compare DNA and like one thing is out of place, like it creates a completely different product. Or like in the genes, if you're missing one of these specific genes, it influences the rest of it. So like, say both these characters have courage, selfless service, resilience, and communication, but say Captain America is, more of a empathetic character, and Iron Man lacks empathy, but he has drive. So like you're now seeing two completely different products that are both still effective, but just because of the absence or of the inclusion of one attribute, you have something completely different. But they're both extremely effective. Iron Man, is more of to me he's more of the narcissistic type leader, but still gets the job done, and he does care because obviously he sacrifices his entire life in the Marvel, in Endgame. But then you have Captain America, who's more of that servant leader that will do whatever it takes to make sure his friends are okay. Like Bucky, when he finds out Bucky is alive, he goes to hell and earth and creates basically an entire civil war just to save his friend, to make sure he's okay.
Yeah, that's good, man. It's good example of two leaders that embody some, but maybe not all the characteristics at the same time. Like maybe they embody them at different ways and at different times. I feel like they both developed too over the course of their time on screen, kind of the first 4 phases or whatever of the MCU all the way up through Endgame. They both kind of have a change. Iron Man, I think, develops from totally self-focused and narcissistic to more self-sacrificial and more giving, more empathetic. And then Captain America, he goes from, completely selfless and totally kind of like uber patriotic to, I don't know. He's very kind of like, obviously he's like the classic kind of nationalistic kind of hero in the very beginning, and that's great. But I think I feel like as the movies go on, and it could be a good or a bad thing, but he, is like I don't know. He's always loyal and stuff like that. But I'm trying to think, like,
does he become a little bit more cynical?
No, I don't know if he becomes cynical. He becomes I guess it's more like a broad kind of, I don't know, you could say like humanistic, or like his care for people in general. Like he's not so much about America, whereas he is about like everybody,
He becomes more humanitarian type.
Yeah,
instead of just like America.
Yeah, like in Civil War,
America first.
Or even what is it? Winter Soldier in Civil War. He's more kind of, I guess you could say, like more libertarian. So maybe we're not talking about so much like leadership styles as like personal worldviews, because he's all about like the individual liberty and individual freedom. And then when they try to bring the whole Wakanda Accords up, and clamp down on their kind of movements. And he's like, no, we're giving up our personal freedoms. We're giving up our freedom of movement and being punished for something, that we shouldn't be punished for or whatever. And then like to Iron Man's like, no, we need to, you're gonna do this, and then that ends up leading to kind of that civil war in the movies at any rate. But anyway, good example of two dudes that share the same space and have similar characteristics, but not like exactly kind of like the same,
Yeah, no, 100%, dude. Well, let's move on to another character. I wanted to talk about Ragnar Lothbrok
Yeah.
from Vikings. So based off the real character in history, but Ragnar, he's almost like a William Wallace type character to me, because they go through so many changes within the monarchy of that show. And I think what sums it up is often this quote, or what sums up him and his leadership style to me is this quote that he says, and he says, power is always dangerous. It attracts the worst and corrupts the best. I never asked for power. Power is only given to those who are prepared to lower themselves to pick it up. So, he kind of was just, through him being himself and him basically just relying on these attributes of a leader, leadership falls in his lap. Like, he's not pursuing power. He's not trying to become the leader. He's not trying to become the king. It just gravitates towards him because he's the most fit person to do it. But I like the fact that he understands that with power, like, people tend to lose themselves because it is an overwhelming force. And if you lower them, the only people that are prepared for it, the only power is only given to those who are prepared to lower themselves to pick it up. So to basically gain power, you are prepared to lose your morality in order to pursue it, instead of just letting it gravitate towards you.
Oh, do you think that's something about lowering your morality? Do you think it's more about humility? That power is
or
only given
humility.
to those
I mean,
lower themselves to pick it up.
I think it's. I'm getting. I perceive that quote as a little bit. If you disagree or have a different perception of it, please let me know, because I think I'm looking at it from more of a like a literal sense. Because when you lower yourself to something, you're changing yourself. So you're like sacrificing your morals. You're sacrificing your beliefs in order to obtain power. So like, say you're a good guy, but if you end up double crossing people, or you betray someone in order to obtain power, you're lowering yourself from your standard in order to achieve it. That's kind of how I'm perceiving it. How are you perceiving it?
No, actually, I agree with you, because given the context of what he's saying, he's talking about how dangerous it is and how it attracts the worst and corrupts the best. But he's given it anyway, so it's almost like he's saying there's a price to pay for power, like you say, and you have to. And seems to be talking about lowering one's moral standards in order to attain power. It's like you gotta do it. If you want it,
you gotta get dirty.
Yeah. So no, I agree with you, man. I don't think I was considering all of what he was saying. So that's cool, man. I like that.
Yeah, and plus he's the guy. He has all the experience. He's a experienced warrior.
Yeah,
he's extremely driven. He has goals that he goes to the ends of. Basically, puts all his effort into achieving. Some of them good, some of them bad. But he knows what he wants, and he gets it because he is driven. But I also appreciate his unquenchable thirst for knowledge, because that's where that experience comes in. The more you teach yourself, the more you know, and the more you can ultimately share with people and contribute. I've never seen a leader that contributes absolutely nothing to the organization. The reason that they're in a leadership position is because they have something to offer. Ragnar Lothbrok is a great example of a leader in pop culture. I think so. What about you, man? Who do you want to talk about?
I want to talk about Captain Picard, man, from the Star Trek The Next Generation. I grew up watching this series, man. I think it went from like 1988 or 89 until 95 or 96. I think they did like 7 seasons. But this is the guy that I grew up watching. And it's funny because I think he went bald way young because he's been pretty much balding his entire life. And he was kind of youngish back then, you know, like maybe he was, I guess maybe he's in his 40s. But anyway, Captain Picard. And he's British too, has that great British accent. But he's a compassionate, he's a strong and controlled guy. Like, right, he comes from that kind of very you know, he can be kind of dispassionate and analytical, but he's also very cultured and empathetic. You know, he's a great diplomat too, but he always goes away. He goes on the away missions in so many instances. There's even times when he'll there's the one where he gets captured and there are four lights kind of thing. David Warner plays the Cardassian. He goes on the mission, the secret mission, because he has the special knowledge and to accomplish it. But he tries to negotiate, but he's willing to use force if he has to. He's just a well-balanced character and yet so like controlled, like he's guided by the principles of the Federation, right? Like he really embodies them, you know. And he has so many great lines throughout the course of the series. Like there's one like there are times, sir, when men of good conscience cannot blindly follow orders. And then it's possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That's not weakness, that's life. And then, I mean, one of my favorites is just a really short line. There's that Yesterday's Enterprise episode where it's an alternate reality in which the Klingons and humans are fighting each other, and the Federation is like sorely losing. So they have to kind of sacrifice this one ship, send it through a time warp in order to change the timeline back to the way things are supposed to be. But before they can do that, the Enterprise gets in this big, huge battle. There's like 3 Klingon warships against just the Enterprise, and things are getting blown up and they're losing their shields and like everything's on fire. And
not the shields.
Yeah. Oh man, shields. Once the shields go, man, I'm telling you. But the Klingons are like over the con. They're like, you know, where you're disabled and defenseless. Prepare to be boarded. And Captain Picard's like, that'll be the day. And then he like jumps on the weapons and he starts firing back. And they're just like, it's so cool, man. He has a great speech where he talks about like the value of truth with it's Wesley. Wesley Crusher is at Starfleet Academy, and he's been involved in some sort of there's been a death that he was involved in, but he's not being forthcoming because he's trying to protect another guy who's kind of getting all the students to conspire to not tell the truth because, you know, they don't have enough evidence to convict him, but they also know that something fishy went on. So Wesley Crusher's kind of having a crisis of conscience, and Picard has this amazing speech. It's like, you know, the guiding light of every Starfleet officer is the truth, whether it's scientific truth or historical truth or personal truth. And if you can't find it in yourself to speak up and tell the truth, then you don't deserve to wear that uniform. And it's like, it's so good, man. And only Patrick Stewart in that role, like he did such a good job. He was able to embody so many aspects of leadership that we've been talking about. That I mean, it's why his character is so iconic even today, you know.
Okay, well, that's great, man. Well, cool. We talked about leadership. We talked about some great leaders in real life and some great leaders in pop culture. We hope you guys learned something because we're about to move on to our fan question.
Yeah, and this isn't actually a question per se, but it's a half comment and half shout out because this is really cool, and we'll definitely have a follow-up answer for this later on. But it's a comment that somebody sent us through email. You can send us emails at pcfmpodcast@gmail.com. We definitely read those. He says, I'm a financial professional and a fangirl. I love you guys. Well, thank you.
Oh, we didn't even know girls listen to this podcast.
Yeah, she's the one. But my VP has beaten cancer 6 times. She is a warrior. Her battles are for life and death. I assume this isn't what you were expecting in terms of warriors when you talked about them. We had a warrior episode. But I'm happy to elaborate if you're interested. Debbie, we absolutely want you to send us the rest of the story. Please do, because we're definitely interested. Like there are warriors and there are warriors. Like we have pop culture examples of great warriors because they embody ideals that we would aspire to. And then there are people like this VP, this this boss here who has beaten cancer 6 times. That's pretty incredible, man. Because
That is pretty incredible.
I've had family who's dealt with cancer, and it is not easy to get it even once.
Yeah, let alone 6 times and have to go through the process because, treating cancer isn't an easy thing. I've seen Breaking Bad. It can be extremely challenging. So to go through that 6 times, that requires a hell of a lot of resilience. So shout out to your boss, Debbie. That is a great story. We'd love to hear more. Thank you for sharing. That's awesome.
Yeah. Now.
All right, man. We have, before we wrap it up, in good old PCFM fat passion and good old passion and fashion,
baby, walking and talking,
passion,
and passion,
walking
and
and talking, passion, fashion and passion. We have a game, and I am the game master, Izzy. So this little game is called Following the Leader. To stay on topic, I'm going to give you the name of an army or force or people, and you tell me who their leader was. This can be real or fictional.
Good
Pretty
game.
easy, huh?
Way to go, Chris. Yeah, no, it's
Way to go,
very
Chris.
clever. Excuse me.
Very clever. And if you're ready to go, we will begin.
I am ready.
Okay, perfect. So for the warm-up, remember, I'm going to name an army, force, or people, and you just tell me who their leader was. So for the warm-up, who is the leader of the Galactic Empire?
That would be Emperor Palpatine.
All right, you seem to get the gist of this game. That is correct.
Okay, cool. Nice.
All right. So
nice when they have
the
title attached to their name, too. Like King Leonidas.
I know, right? Yeah, that makes it so much easier. All right, here we go. Battlestar Galactica.
The Battlestar Galactica's captain is Commander Adama. Adama is his name. I'm having a hard time. I think Lee Adama is his son. Or is it Lee Adama? But it's Adama, Captain Adama or Commander Adama, played by Edward James Olmos in the TV series. But I'm having trouble.
You know who plays them. You know their name. I'm just going to give it to you. Okay. It is Admiral Adama.
Adama.
Technically, calling them commander is the same as saying their rank.
Okay.
Because that's
Admiral,
their position.
Admiral Adama. Okay,
Admiral Adama. Okay, I'll give it to you. So you got that one. All right, here we go. Next, Easy Company, Band of Brothers.
Oh my gosh, he wrote the book.
We've talked about him a few times.
Dick Winters.
That is correct. Captain Winters.
Okay, Captain Winters. Okay.
Commander. Yeah. No, I'll take Dick Winters because that was his name, Richard Winters.
I was like,
nice. So extra points for. Yeah. Okay, moving on. The Reapers, Mass Effect 2 and 3. The leader of the Reapers.
I didn't know they had a leader. Oh, man. That's rough, man. The leader of the Reapers. Oh, man. Dude, that's tough. I played this game, the Legendary Edition. That's what I was thinking of. I played the Legendary Edition. The leader of the Reapers in Mass Effect 2 and 3. Well, there's what is it? What's the illusory, the illustrious, the elusive man? There's the elusive man, but he just comes he gets brainwashed. He gets indoctrinated. Dude, I don't know, man.
Okay, I'll give you 5 more seconds to think about it.
The Reapers, they take over that robotic race.
Time's up.
Okay.
Well, I'm just gonna give it to you, buddy. It is Harbinger.
Harbinger. Okay. All right. Yeah.
You know who that is?
Makes sense. No, I've just been drawing a blank, actually.
Okay, well,
you guys let me know. Let me know. Get a hold of me on Instagram and let me know who is the leader of who's Harbinger and the Reapers.
Okay. All right. Moving on. We're about halfway done. So, leader of the Kingdom of Rohan.
Theoden King. King Theoden.
Theoden King.
Theoden King.
King Theoden.
Remember the line, you know?
Yeah, literally. All right. Awesome, man. I actually just watched the extended version last night. Okay.
Did you hear that people are clamoring for like a Jackson cut of Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, it's about that's going to be of is this a new cut of
No.
Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, well, people were saying, I don't know if it's like a serious thing or where I heard it from, but like, like, what if Peter Jackson went back and recut the Lord of the Rings movies to be like as long as he wanted them to be like a
I hope they
24-hour
would.
film?
I hope
I
they
would totally
would
watch it.
because the extended versions, I totally forgot
Totally.
about them. So they make the movie 10 times better.
Totally.
Because there is so much that if you've seen the regular version, and then you see the extended version, there is so much that they cut out that just blends the story together even more
Yep.
and makes it like seamless. So
Yep.
like if you're gonna watch the movies, watch the extended movies because they,
Yes.
there's a lot in there that you don't even realize that you're missing until you see it, and then you're like, this is so much better.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, almost done here. 3 more. Who is the leader of the Umbrella Corporation?
Well, it's not Wesker. He works for Umbrella. I mean, Oswald E. Spencer was the guy who started the Umbrella Corporation. So I'm gonna go with that because it's been my email, Spencer. Oh God, I don't want to get my email out. Anyway, we can maybe cut that out or not because I didn't say the whole thing. But Oswald E. Spencer started Umbrella Corporation. Wesker just works for them. So anyway.
Okay, Oswald E. Spencer, final answer?
Yeah.
You are correct, my friend. It is
Hey.
indeed Oswald E. Spencer. So way to go with your gut and almost give away your email. So people
address.
can reach out to you. Yeah, so you can get scammed.
It's not the worst
All
thing
right.
ever, I guess.
Moving right along, almost done. Who is the leader of the Deep Space Nine?
Captain Benjamin Sisko. Ben Sisko.
Okay, you are correct. Commander Benjamin Sisko. What is Deep Space Nine from?
Deep Space Nine is Star
from
Trek. That's a Star Trek series
Trek.
that came
Okay.
after The Next Generation. It was actually a space station, which was kind of a switch instead of being a ship. Then it was Voyager. Then what was the one with Scott Bakula in it? It's been a long road getting from there to here. I can remember the song, but I can't remember the title of the show. Anyway, it was really good. That's the one. Deep Space Nine is where they started going a little darker in their writing. I think it's the same writer who ended up doing Battlestar Galactica after that. Super real,
Nice.
hard hitting, like morally gray kind of episodes and moral choices as they were fighting the Dominion, which was like a big threat in the show. Anyway, Ben Sisko.
Anyways, Ben Sisko. Okay, long-winded. Yeah, you're right. Okay, so finally, let's see if you get this one. You're doing quite well, but I don't know if you're gonna get this one because I didn't even know. Who is the leader of the Expendables?
I mean, it's Sylvester Stallone, right? Do I have to come up with his character's name?
Yeah, you need to know his character's name.
Oh God, I don't know.
Which I was like, I didn't know his name.
Yeah,
Are
I don't
you
know.
kidding me?
Yeah, when is it ever significant? When do they ever say his name? And when is it ever like? I don't know. But I don't know his name. But it's Sylvester Stallone. So give me a second. Let me
Looking around the room, looking for
just
objects.
looking for
that
inspiration. It's he's Lighty Mick Xbox.
Okay, I'll give you the first name is also the name of a purple dinosaur.
Barney? Barney.
And then the second for his last name, the hint I'll give you is this is a department store that offers discounts on designer clothing.
Barney TJ Maxx. Barney Marshall? Ben Marshall?
What? One more.
Barney.
You go to TJ Maxx, Marshalls, or
Barney Penny. Barney Sears. Barney Sears?
No. Barney Ross.
Barney.
You go to Ross.
Oh, I got it at Ross.
I'm gonna go to Ross. Yeah, so his name is Barney Ross.
Okay.
So it is Sylvester Stallone's character, but unfortunately, he didn't get his name. So I'll give you half credit, but cool, man.
All right.
That's all the ones I got for you. You did well.
That was
You
fun,
did
man.
very well. All right, well, good. I'm glad you enjoyed that. And more importantly, I hope you people listening to this podcast enjoyed this episode about leadership. A lot of good attributes were talked about. A lot of great characters were mentioned that embody the spirit of the leader. If you guys have any comments or questions on the episode for us, like Izzy said earlier, make sure you send us an email or an Instagram message to the pcfmpodcast@gmail.com or on PCFM Podcast on Instagram. Izzy, you got anything?
Yeah, join our Patreon, folks. If you enjoy the show, you get extra episodes, full-length episodes, and we do a once a month, a live stream of a movie for our top tier subscribers. So it's a good time. If you want more of this content, man, we love doing it, and we look forward to pumping it out in the future. We got more stuff in the works too, so it should be online soon.
All right. And with that, cue music.